You're listening to Out of the Box, a place for marketers to get inspired, get going, and break out of the box.
So welcome back, everyone. You're listening to Out of the Box, the marketing podcast exploring out-of-the-box approaches to marketing and growth. Today on the show, we have Vincent Wu, who is the COO of one of the leading news apps out there today, Newsbreak. Vincent, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
So I've mentioned you're the COO of Newsbreak, which is actually the number one news app today. But you have an interesting sort of career history. You've been managing operations and growth for online news publications for many years. You were head of operations at Huffington Post, head of operations for the news division of Oath, and also ran operations at AOL. So with that pedigree, how have you sort of seen growth marketing and strategy change over time as you've been in the industry?
Yeah, I've seen through my career, I've been working into many different media companies and growth, and many companies that actually call it audience development, right? It's a very important part of the operation, and I ran in all my roles, including my role right now in Newsbreak, I ran all this audience development work. One thing I've seen interesting and things are changing is that the growth objective is actually very changing too in the past 5 years, right? It's like in the past, I think in the very early 2013, 14, I think people are thinking about growth on audience development is simply just bringing more users to your website, your property, right? And I think it's at that time it's too early to tell what's the actual kind of the loyalty, the retention, and sort of like the quality of the user. It's more about the number, right? How many UV, how many page views you can actually bring to your websites. Because especially at that time, the website actually doesn't have too much funneling, right? The actual subscriber, the VIPs, or sort of like the actual loyal user, people just most of the time they're competing on the comScore and see how big is their audience. So I think things change a lot, of course, during all the years, especially when Facebook and all these social platforms joined the game. I think starting from 2014, 2015, and people started to realize that, of course, those social platforms and tech platforms has very big power in terms of driving audiences. So meanwhile, I think the growth tactics and strategy in media company also change along the path toward more like from the volume game to more like actual like high quality sort of the loyal audience development. So it's like starting with the visitors, and then some of them like the target becoming to convert them to be a newsletter subscribers. Some of them converting to app downloads, app user, and then eventually a lot of I can see a lot of media companies starting to build their like paid subscribers or some sort of even free subscribers, some kind of like the bottom of the funnel. So that's something. It's very the trend right now. It's everyone, I think now, including Newsbreak, including I think my previous employer, they're all focusing on not just the acquisitions on the top of the funnel, but also how to move the users in terms of growth through the funnel, eventually arriving to the bottom of the funnel about a truly loyal user, a regular user in the long term.
And kind of what you've described now is in many ways, I think where everyone wants to be is in a sense sort of like a digital first media company, maybe even mobile first. But in a sense, you've witnessed the collision of media and technology firsthand over your career. What's your take on how media companies can kind of survive in today or tomorrow's world, right? Everyone talks about how news is in trouble, and kind of the publishing industry is in trouble. You guys aren't. So what's your take on how kind of news and media companies can survive and succeed?
Yep, sure. I think it's almost a consensus right now. Media or news is struggling. I think it's already struggling. We'll continue to struggle. I think there are many reasons for that. I think, of course, it's a fact that one of the key factors is like the disruption by the tech companies, right? The tech platform, Google, Facebook, Twitter. But I think my long-term observations and my own experience, I don't believe media or news will die or say in the long term. I don't think the prediction that media will become just a dependent now the tech season, right? So it's like, I think a lot of people are saying, hey, maybe the media company eventually just become a dependent of those tech platforms, and tech platforms will drive everything from user like content creation. Like, of course, the media company will essentially just become a content creator without their own brand and own property, just like relying on tech companies that like Google or Facebook-ish type of platform to survive, and then the platform would drive everything from like audience development, monetizations, like a lot of like product experience. I actually don't believe that. I don't think that's a healthy and stable, situation, or sort of like the end situation of the media industry. I think to some extent, I believe like content is king, right? Of course, people argue content is also a commodity. I agree to it too. So right now it's a bit, the content supply is a lot. There's so many supply of the content, and platform, tech company and tech platform, usually you only see a definite number of platform, and I think is the core of the dynamic right now. Is there's so many supply on the content side, but the platform actually dominates a lot of things is through the process. But on the other side, I don't believe that, because I think the platform also realized that without actual high quality content creation, without enabling the media and news companies to develop their brand and actually have their own property, this is not a sustainable long-term visions. Like I think eventually that's very dangerous to go that direction. So my personal prediction, I think there are two predictions going on that from my observations. One is I believe there's like big brands, big news brand, big media brands. There will be some industry consolidation, and they will still, like I think in the past, like they try to form some consortium or some group to back better like negotiation power with like platforms. I think that trend will still continue, and eventually, I think there will be some of the big brands, big groups. They will form those like consortium to actually become they will also become a platform too. So I would imagine there will be more platforms coming out from those big brands and big media companies. On the other side, another prediction from mine is that on the business model, I don't believe in right now. Quite a few media company, news company are trying to pay subscription model. I personally don't believe in that. Will help the industry, but especially for that may help for the entertainment side, like Netflix type of content, right? But for the news industry, I don't believe that would totally save the world. Because at the end of the day, I don't think most of the consumer would be willing to pay for just news, right? So that's especially digital news.
How should news companies monetize then?
I think I think the answer could be some kind of sharing economy model. So yeah, platform will help, but the platform shouldn't be just like I take over everything. I take people, for example, no, just like taking Facebook as example. Right now, I think most of the media companies, their concern is if they build too much content on Facebook, and the user will eventually just like recognize the Facebook brand, and then they would just go to Facebook to find the content, which is already happening, right? I think the answer should be some sort of sharing economy model. The platform, provides some kind of content infrastructure, the sort of content sourcing, the how develop content, the tools to help media company develop the content, the tool to help media company to find the audience, and of course monetize the audience. But that model should be more like an infrastructure play. It's more like providing all the tool and all the necessary services for you, but the media companies should still build their brands, to have the property, and actually the consumer wouldn't find that there's actually platform behind that. So they will still I'm still going to a news website called XYZ, and I'm still like viewing ads on it. I'm still like consuming the content on it, but that platform is essentially lowering all the operating costs of the media industry, because now the big company, small company, one of the biggest challenge of them is their operating cost is very high. The content creation cost is high, the infrastructure is high, the CMS, the marketing costs, like the audience development cost is high. So how do you sort of like apply this like very successful sharing economy model that's on the other industry like the hospitality industry, the transportation industry, and the music industry too, right? To the news industry. I think it's one of the prediction that I have here.
So let's talk a little bit more specifically about Newsbreak. What does your COO, presumably that includes quite a lot, what does your role actually entail, and how does it connect to growth? How does growth strategy fit in with other functions or activities that you oversee, like revenue, product marketing, etc.?
At Newsbreak, Newsbreak essentially is a tech and engineering and product driven company. I joined the Newsbreak about 2 years ago. I saw the opportunity to join the team to help them to develop the business arm of it. Basically, anything now directly like tied to engineering and product. So that could entail a lot of things, right? Growth is one thing. There are a lot of BD content. I spend a lot of time in content. And all the other like business functions. One thing I have to point out is Newsbreak has pretty unique culture and structure here. Is that we don't necessarily like many other company, we have a department or teams like, oh, I'm running this, you're running that. We are very flat and we are very project oriented. So one thing I see and find it very intriguing, and actually I believe is one of the success factor in Newsbreak why we achieved so much growth in the past 2 years is that we have very dynamic culture. So basically we are project based, and growth is one of the key part of it, but growth is also integrating it with each of the projects. So for us, it's more like a growth, product, content, monetizations, operations, everything tied together. Every component of the consumer lifecycle is tying to each together in different type of projects. So that's sort of the operating model here, that we don't necessarily have, there's a growth team just doing like user acquisitions or organic growth. And then there's we don't actually separate it like that. It's more like a very dynamic culture and dynamic model that is, I think, is working pretty well for us to get, because for growth, of course, like getting the audience, but more importantly is actually how to retain the audience, grow the audience, and then of course monetize the audience.
And it does seem to be working well. You guys are hugely successful. You're the number one news app on iOS and Android, and ahead of also all the major publications, right? With strong historical brands, which is super impressive considering how tough, we've talked about this, how tough the media industry is today. What do you mainly attribute that growth to? Is it the flat structure and the kind of project-based approach, or is it something specific that you guys, without revealing too much secret sauce, or is it something specific that you guys do when it comes to growth?
Yeah, I think the structure is one thing, the culture is one thing. The second thing is another culture we have here. I don't think we have a very like secret sauce here, to be very honest. The way that, how the structure is one thing. Then I think is how to actually optimize it and how to operate it. And one philosophy and one thing we have in Newsbreak is that we don't believe in secret sauce. We don't believe there's something that other people haven't tried, but we believe in the operational efficiency or excellence, right? For example, growth, or the connection between growth and content, growth versus monetizations. I think it's about this like kind of flywheel and the connection between different focuses, how to actually optimize it to the very extreme level. So that means a lot of like very data oriented optimization, a lot of like content oriented optimization. Sometimes we make some of the bold, like kind of subjective but bold bet on certain like areas of product. Also, I think one thing we gain a lot of success and see a lot of growth is how fast we can react to the market change, right? That's one thing. Startup has a very, especially Newsbreak has a very unique and big advantage. Is like we are very, like basically, for example, the pandemic happened in early March this year in the United States. It actually took us about less than 24 hours to put up our I think is if not really the first one of the first company put up the coronavirus tab, and actually with all the stats and related news and local news things around me within less than 24 hours. So it's something very working well here is, and of course we tie that product and tie that content back to the growth tactics and strategies that in our day-to-day practice. That's another thing I'm very proud of about our team, to how to actually make very quick but also very targeted actions to drive, and of course at that time work really really well. We get us a lot of user that have never heard about us before, have never heard about Newsbreak before, but because of the big events, the big news cycle, and they find the Newsbreak, the effort on on not only the coronavirus tab, but like coronavirus and the pandemic is actually very tied to local, which is our core company. And they find it, okay, maybe I was attracted by your coronavirus like statistics, but when they download our app and then they find, oh, this is Newsbreak actually offers something that I never used before. I never thought about. There's actually a local news focused app offering all the useful information around me. So that's one thing. It's the core about the company, about the local. Everything we're doing is about local. So on one side we do the news, kind of like going deep and going like very vertically deep onto the news content. But on the other side, we also horizontally expanding to other type of content, like coronavirus is one perfect example. Recently, I think there's a lot of a political, debate and protests happening in the United States. And we acted also very quickly on that too, and that's around local, right? People care about that, and that's also driving our winning strategy here.
So come for the corona, stay for the local news.
Yeah.
So what does you've talked about audience development and growing a loyal, understanding and identifying who are loyal users and growing that audience. What does the right user look like for Newsbreak? Do you have an ideal customer profile, or are you going after a mass audience?
First of all, we truly believe local news is for everyone, right? Because I think there are some certain steps in terms of early adopters, like later adopters. But news is for everyone, especially local news. Our philosophy is, everyone wants to essentially. Some people would say, "Hey, I don't care in local news." They would just through our user started. Some people would say that, but that to us is more like a hidden interest. Because a lot of people, to some extent, even they care like national news, entertainment news, lifestyle news a lot. We believe everyone have the interest about to know what's going on around him or her, right, in the daily life, because everyone live locally. Whether you are a celebrity, big guy, big people, or you are just ordinary person, you still live in an environment that you need to deal with your local communities, right? I don't think we have a very perfect profile saying that, oh, this is my target audience, this is not my target audience. I think everyone should be. But of course, as I said, there's some sort of like early adopters of local news. Some people are very aware that they like local news. They want to consume local news every time they wake up in the morning. And some people would be just a bit like hesitant, and they need some education. They need to see the product. They actually need to use it for a while to realize that they actually find the local news are useful for their daily life, right? So for that, that's like we have a different tactics and sort of like targeting, for different phases of the audience. Like maybe we identify some audience that with some characteristics, they are probably more likely to be the early adopters. And some user could be bucketed as like we need more like longer term, reaching out to them, build the awareness, but also build this sort of like let them understand our products, positioning, what things that we are offering, and we probably need to reach out to them from multiple touch points, multiple times to actually not only just to get them download the app, but also become an actual user of our app. So those are the target tactics that we are using. And another angle we actually evaluate and do it is local versus national news. It's relatively less digitized, right? A lot of local audience, like national news, people go to all the platforms, CNN, Fox, get the national news. It's very crowded, right? local news in the past, people do what? People go to like buy local newspapers, right? People watch local TV station. And then jokingly saying that not actually not a joke, but a lot of people still go to church to get the news, what's going on around the neighborhood, right? So that's a part. The longer term, our targeting is really targeting those real people, and people maybe today not using a digital way to find and consume local news, but long term convert them and help them build the local digital news consumption pattern, like the habit. So that's our the audience profile we are talking about.
And let's talk about channels. We talked a little bit about targeting. What are the most lucrative, or I mean, I guess you could look at this from either scale or quality. But what are the best user acquisition channels for news apps? And have you seen that change over the course of your career? I mean, we've talked about platforms, obviously, and building audiences on Facebook, and the fact that can be quite risky. But what about as the industry has evolved and other channels have come out? What have you seen to work really well?
Sure. I think the channel always like change all the time, right? In my last like 10 years, I've seen up and down many times. Facebook is sometime went up very high, and then later they pull back a bit, not a bit, but actually pretty significantly because of all the reasons. And Google become the number one source of traffic for most of the news companies, right? I think when you say like the most lucrative user acquisition channel, I think eventually comes down to the objective or the key metrics, right? I think it's of course is the price, right? The cost of it, whether it's actual like paid acquisition cost or more like your internal cost. How many people you got to staff to actually do it? Let's say you are paying, you're actually posting content organically on Facebook, even though you don't actually pay that. Right, sometimes like a lot, but you actually need to staff a pretty decent size of team to do social editing, and that's also cost, right? So cost is one thing. I think very importantly is the scale, right? I think some of the channels that even the cost is low, but it's very hard to scale up, and that's also another key things that I believe all the people with in this role or in similar roles would consider. The third is, of course, the quality, right? Some of the channels that, it's even the cost is good, it's very scalable, but eventually coming down to like the quality of the audiences and the retention rate is low, or the monetization rate is low. So those are like the quality consideration. In my last like 10 years, my observation, of course, Facebook is still probably the largest one, I have to say, right? I do believe a lot of like performance marketers, like growth teams, audience development team are still heavily using Facebook. I think it's of course because of the scale that they have. It's still like one. I think it's still the largest one. Have like especially for news, right? Facebook is an engagement platform. Although they make some strategic move like to stay away from like news a bit, I think still a lot of users Facebook to find news. That's one thing. You have to admit that. So still one of the largest one. But I think things have changed a lot, right? It's really about like, for example, the content format, the actual like targeting tactics. How do you actually set your campaigns? How to do targeting? How to bid it on the pricing? Things have changing all the time. And then I remember maybe 5 years ago when I asked my team to run the first like paying campaign on Facebook. It's very different from the tactics that today we are running. It's like all the tactics, all the settings, and all the like targeting and bidding strategy are different. But back to news, I think one thing it's if you ask me about the actual like in the like channel versus like user segment mapping, I guess that's the question, right? What channel are driving what type of user segment? I think for news is a very it's more comes down to the consumer journey. How actually consumer discover the news and consume the news and react to the news, right? And let me give you an example. I think there's actually a trend going on right now for the last few years. Facebook, for example, is an engagement platform. And a lot of people actually go to Facebook for discovering the news at the beginning, like when they wake up, because there's so many news out there. So a lot of people choose to, I don't have time to consume all the news. It's so overwhelming. I will only see news that are shared or referred by my friends and family through social platform. So they would like go as a Facebook to find that. So Facebook, yeah, it's more like a news discovery acquisition channel for a lot of news players. Though they would put a lot of acquisition effort on Facebook to sort of fight for that early morning window to get people to see their like content at the first time, and that would actually translate it into not only the pay but also how to do the earned marketing, right? Because people tend to trust the news stories that are shared by their friends and family instead of directly from the news outlets, right? But then I think the second step on the news journey is that a lot of people, especially those like target audience segments, we call it news junkie. Like people actually spend a lot of some people spend a lot of time on reading news and digesting the news and go very deep and then reading article by article. When they finish reading one article, they will actually would like to see a related article about that. Those we call it news junkie, right? And those are usually a very high value news user for news company. And a lot of time they will find out they don't necessarily stay on Facebook for that. After they find out, there's some breaking news and big news happening, some big event happening, they will actually go to Google and search for those related story, the full kind of like full coverage of it. And then Google become a pretty good channel for more like a deep engaging, like kind of like engaging with those new junkie. And that's another like very typical funnel of a news audience. Like YouTube is another thing, right? It's by definition, it's not primary. It's a news platform. People usually don't go to YouTube for just for news, right? They go to it for entertainment, for a lot of different things. But it's so prevalent, it's so big, and it's very powerful place to, and the experiences are also very good. So people actually a lot of time they would deeply like engage with those like videos in the video format, the news stories, the more like a deep dive of news events on YouTube. So yeah, that's another example. Like YouTube become also a important channel for many news company to get those like truly engaged audience and with the video preference, because there's also another trend going on is a lot of users, they tend to don't have the patience or the time to read the text. They actually want to just read the video, and YouTube become a good channel for that. So those are like some examples. And third, I think the last one is one thing I want to mention is like the partnership with like players like Iron Source or other like kind of like carriers. OEM is also very, very important for news company, because let me say that like a lot of users, some users will choose I only go to CNN, or I only go to Fox, or I only go to like Yahoo or USA Today because of their like preference, because of their political views, or they just want certain type of content from certain type of channel. But there's also a big chunk of users, they want more like an aggregation and curation of all the news, right? They actually want one single place to get all the news stories from different sources, from different point of view, from different outlets. And they want a daily habit. They just want, okay, I open my mobile phone, I have a place that I can very conveniently, I can open the app, I get everything I need, right? So for that, it's a more like a convenient channel play for news company, and that's why Apple News gained a lot of market share, because they're like pre-installing it Apple News on iOS, and that's sort of not fair, to be honest. My point is the maybe people call it like the pre-installation, or more like the more like a partnership with the consumer touch point on the mobile phone. It's also very critical channel for news player, because news player can capture the audience who actually have a very heavy daily habit on news consumption using that channel.
People like my husband, who is exactly that person that spends a lot of time going article by article and then searching for related articles, especially in Corona time. So you guys, we've said that you guys are number one on the app stores. Now that you're at the top, what's the marketing strategy moving forward? Is it about being defensible? Is it about continuing to scale? Where do you guys go from here?
definitely very, very going attack, right? So I think we are going all in growing our user. We are number one, but we are not just happy about like being number one on the news, right? We actually want to. Our vision is to become the default destination for everything about local. So we're actually going a bit beyond just news, like traditional definition of news. We actually want to provide a default destination for people who care about local. People want to know everything about local. So Newsbreak, basically our vision is everything about local. So it's all the other type of content, information, transaction. For us, the marketing strategy is we've been pretty successful in driving, is particularly in performance marketing, driving a lot of new users. One thing is we actually would like to go deeper and invest more in brand marketing, because we do believe there's a more like a seamless or a positive, like kind of how to call it, the support between the connection between the brand marketing versus like the performance marketing. We got to build a brand and using the brand to reach out to audiences that is very hard to reach out to through performance marketing method. And even some of the users we can still reach out to them, but there's a certain type of user they never, or very, very rare they will actually be converted by performance marketing methods. So we actually would like to build up that multi-channel strategy to reach out to, especially for local audiences. So especially, as I said, local is a bit less digitized. So people still like go to traditional places to consume, to find the news and talk about things they would like to talk. So we would like to build up more local presence using brand marketing and using some new marketing techniques and combining the traditional marketing versus the new like technology and marketing to drive the audience growth. And we have a very ambitious goal to drive the local penetration from the current level to like 3 to 4x from now using that approach. So overall, I think the marketing strategy is building the full life cycle of the awareness first. And then we do a lot of acquisition through performance marketing. But then it's very important. It's more like the retention and the loyalty, right? How to actually continue to remind people and get people to use Newsbreak and we activating them and eventually drive them to go down the funnel to become our loyal user. Those are our like core like philosophy about marketing.
Mm-hmm. And as a last question, what's the most out of the box marketing you've ever done or seen done?
I haven't done very out of box, but I've seen some very out of box like tactics and strategy. Is like I feel like marketing is so advanced right now. They're very like good marketing campaign, but I've seen some not necessarily from the news industry, but like some of the product industry, like just regular product. Sometimes a sophisticated marketing message and a sophisticated like marketing campaign. I've seen people doing very straightforward marketing tactics. Say, hey, this product is good. This app is good. This is like very simple message and very just like maybe going to the local area and just tell people, don't look around. This is the news. This is the news app. This is like this is going to meet your needs and try it. And very like straightforward marketing message. Sometimes it's actually powerful. I grew up in another country. I've seen like in my home country, I've seen like some of the very expensive like TV ads, like put them on the major events. I think the campaign are very simple. They're not like as sophisticated as that I've seen in many other TV commercials. It's more like just tell people this is exactly what you need. 1, 2, 3, and that's it. I find it pretty fascinating. It's out of box. Yeah.
Yeah. So in a way, in an over sophisticated world, being out of the box is actually just being simple about it and not over sophisticated.
Yeah. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Vincent. It's been a really interesting episode. How are we going to save the news industry with a sharing economy? You heard it here first. And thank you, everyone, as always, for listening.
Thank you very much.